And it ended up in the Montague post office. And somebody wrote on there, "Tried your old brother." And that was my dad, and we lived on the Stony Lake Road. But we got a letter, and he was related to us. And then the years went by. That was 1932. 1932. And the years went by, and the war came on. The war was over. We began to get letters from Germany asking for help. And finally we got a letter from him again. And he said, "My aunt wouldn't tell me about you people." But he wrote me a couple letters, and that was the end of it. But they were begging for food. So that's my experiences for the World War II. And now I'm 94 years old. And he said, one of the men came back to this country and worked in Oceana County, and his daughter went to Shelby High School and graduated with him. And she lives in this area.
And did I hear you say she was an actor hawk, you think, right?
I think her last name was Actor Hall. She lives down Duck Creek, he said.
Well, once you get into the actor hawk family tree, there's...
I was thinking about Montague way back in 1944. It was a kind of a lawless place. We had mayor up there, Dr. Wilkie. He tried to control things, and we had a police force of one, highly armed with a .38 Smith & Wesson.
Louis the Law.
Roger, shut up. And the policeman always carried a big flashlight, big long thing, and if you got out of hand, he'd wrap you up that alongside your head to straighten you out. He was called Louis the Law. He had a real name, but I won't mention it. Us kids called it Louis the Law. Louis the Law. And speaking of Shelby POW camp, my dad was fluent in German. He at one time was minister of the Lutheran church up here years ago. It was called the German Lutheran Church, just like your church was called the Swedish Lutheran Church. So anyway, I mentioned the law because my story, the law is involved. So it was in the summer, probably August. A bunch of us guys were standing down here by about where the book nook is. And here comes a couple guys walking along with khakis on, just like a soldier would wear. And I said, "Those are German war prisoners. I spotted them first." They're walking over there, and then they went along there about where the senior center is. We were over there where the book nook is. There was guys, Kenny Rampton, Paul Lundquist, Tom King, and myself, and some other guys. So Paul Lundquist was kind of a heavy-set guy, kid, and we said, "Paul, go get Louis the Law." So Paul lived up here in the corner of Hunt and Ferry Street. He had to go up there and get his bicycle, come back down here, go up Dowling Street, and go down about 6 blocks to get Louis. Louis only worked nights. He came on at 10 at night and went home in the morning. So here we are downtown. Those guys are walking along. Tom King was kind of a cocky kid. Those two German guys were walking along, and Tom got right up behind them like that. They didn't turn around at all. They kept on walking. They walked down Ferry, down where the farmer's market is, where the woods is down there. They bedded down for the night. Well, pretty soon, here comes Louis the Law, chugging down the hill with his .32 Chevy, just coming like crazy. And we just kind of stood down there on the street. Louis went down in there in the woods, and pretty soon we heard a gunshot go off. Pretty soon Louis comes out with these 2 young kids, about 18 years old, and they brought him down to City Hall here. We had a couple of jail cells in the back, but they didn't put them in a cell. Pretty soon the sheriff's department came up, and the army came down and picked them up. And I remember one of the young guys says to us, he says, "Good night." And that was the end of the prisoners.
I just lived in Hart, Michigan, and I was like 7 years old. And my brother, of course, we talk about the fear and not fearful. My mother was always fearful because we had relatives in the because I'm European descent, Polish Russian. And she would say, "Don't wave at the prisoners." They would drive by Walkerville Road in their trucks, the kind that had, I guess, surround. Anyway, they were there and they would wave to us. And I lived on Walkerville Road on Farm, and it was a dirt road then, and I wanted some excitement, so I waved. And it was exciting, you know, we'd wave to them and they were singing. But basically, what I did, I kind of bugged my father all the time because I was the oldest. I was 7. My brother Walter, who heard the story, he was a little younger. He was 4. But I would say, "Daddy, Daddy, take us to the fairgrounds," because I wanted to see the prisoners. And that was a big treat. Look at the prisoners. And I remember that they were kind of back there. I don't think they had wire. It might have been chicken wire, but that was it. So the big excitement was going with Dad in the old Chevy and watching the prisoners of war behind them. And that's it.
And that, you know, your daughter should be afraid to go down the street or whatever. And that somehow, you know, what that tells me is that basically the hysteria that somehow is produced through the media or through whatever. I mean, when you think of John Wayne movies or whatever, and, you know, whatever's going on, and that somehow, you know, the hysteria to make you hate an enemy. And then somehow when the enemy arrives and is walking down your street, it's like, you know, Guten Abend or something like that. How are you? You know, it's an interesting kind of message. Like, they were just ordinary people, and my reading is they were very fortunate to be here, because you read about, you know, Lindy Hunt and things like that, who got caught after the Battle of the Bulge, and they went through really hell in German prisoner of war camps. But anyway, okay, back down memory lane. I was thinking that I was kind of an innocent time, you know, the war is going on, and the thing about wars is that somehow, you know, Albert already mentioned, you saved aluminum foil, you saved rubber, you had gas rationing, you had to avoid war bonds. You know, when you had a war, there was like a whole community involved. Now there's, you know, we're in the 16th year of a war in Afghanistan. You know what's going to happen. You kind of know, but anyway, and probably 18 anyway. But just the idea of participating, and you know, it was an effort. And so I was just thinking about doing my math, and that I was probably in the 4th grade. And I'm going to point at Jack Lipker, because I said, "Jack, you ought to say something too," because we're about the same world. But anyway, like, where the Book Nook was a later edition during the 1960s, and so there would have been like the old part of Hunt's Hardware, and then somehow there was the big city hall was on the corner, big 2-story building, full basement, wonderful open creek, willow tree, picnic table and stuff down there, before it was all paved over kind of thing, and so a very scenic spot. But then alongside this one building, the last building going this way, there was a whole series, like a platform, with a whole series of tanks, as I recall. And they somehow would they floated cherries, or they would like wash out fruit and stuff like that in the tanks. And so, you know, you were up on like Ferry Street looking down, the creek going through there, and then here were all these tanks. And that's where the German prisoner of wars were working. And you think, like, so what's going on down there? I mean, you know, my last name is Scharmer, S-C-H. I was looking at some of the letters over there, and everything was sent to Shelby. It was like S-C-H. And my dad always used to say, "Don't forget to put the C in Scharmer, because I'm not supposed to be there." The other half is O'Connell, which is totally Irish, but anyway. So, you know, you were aware of the war going on, but it was just a very innocent thing. They had those tubs down below, and that's where they came and they worked out. And if Albert said they walked over and into the bushes by whatever, and had to get Louis the Law. Louis Buttleman, it was a wonderful story because he had an old car. There's one cop in town, and he would park down there across the street from Hornberger's gas station, and there wasn't even a traffic light. And so when you got a driver's license later on when you were a teenager, if Louis the Law was parked down there, you could go 45 miles an hour in a 25-mile zone because the law is down there and he's not going to get you. And so he was a wonderful old man, good stories. The other thing I brought along is I'm going to put this over there. You can take a look later on. But what it is
I can play Carol Merrill.
I'll just hold it.
Thank you for your
There's a picture of like the orchard kind of thing, and I enjoy reading the White Lake Beacon. I hope you all subscribe to the White Lake Beacon because Greg needs your money, and he's a very good community service guy. But anyway, I got involved in writing up an article on Bill Gebhardt, Willard Benton Gebhardt, and he was a great landscape architect who went to Cornell, and then also he designed the Causeway. There's a wonderful story about Sidoni and he getting together. He does a psychic number about what's going to happen in Bill's future. But anyway, I'll put this up here, but there's the little roadside stand that everybody had, and that's where you would put your props and come out and buy. This one you can probably tell what year it is if you know old cars, because that's the clue. Then the photo on the bottom is a big 8x10, all right? I'll set it over there so you can see it. But it's interesting to look at, and it's all the pickers, and I mean, Mary, you probably might be some relatives or something. But anyway, they have those triangular ladders that you climb up, and pole ladders, and they're picking cherries, and you can sort of see the fruit baskets in front of them. In the White Lake Beacon recently, there was an article about Adele Kinney Roberts. We all know the Kinney kids. We grew up with them, and so she's been writing up an article called Growing Up in Montague. Her most recent one was like, she went and she picked cherries, and I forgot how much she got paid for doing that, but somehow that's what you did. She would have been probably, I don't know, grade school or maybe getting into probably grade school. But anyway, the photo which I think is very curious about this 8.5 by photo at black and white at the bottom is that there's a guy with a vest. He actually has a tie on, and you think, well, maybe he is the owner of the farm, whoever it is, and then just different people. But the curious thing in reading Adele's article and what happened, and I was kind of thinking about this afterwards, that somehow picking cherries or picking fruit and things like that. Okay, what happens is that somehow this is obviously an early 1930 photograph of an all-white, I don't want to get into racist trouble, but somehow, it's just like an all-white group picking fruit. Family members, your brother, your sister, your cousin, the kids down the street kind of thing, they're all doing it, right? And that somehow, then there was that break. And the break was basically the German prisoners came here because everybody was off to war. And they needed, they needed help. And so the German prisoners, and that somehow, I'll look at the Oceania people saying that, was it like after World War II that somehow whitey became too important to pick cherries or pick fruit, and that's when sort of the Hispanic people came in and started picking fruits and had their okay.
Was the best track around. I said, how come? Because I knew that we had to pick cinders almost the size of our fists out of it. Every time we went to a track meet there, we'd walk the track and clean it out just so it'd be safe to run. He said the prisoners of war had that track all rigged, and it was immaculate. They loved to go there to run, even though I know he didn't run, but he said it was just a great track, and I always think about that when I'm in there. It was actually the only square track in the area, too, or rectangular, I should say. I don't think it's around anymore, but it had flat ends. It was very unique. Yes, dear?
Oh, okay.
But I don't know Norm Sills, how many knew him, the barber. He was on Normandy carrying machine gun shells up the hill, and here comes a bunch of Germans with their hands on their head. He says, boy, I wanted to drop the shells and get in that line because I knew they were going to America.